Welcome to the course on computer science, the subject operating system, the topic security. One of the earlier topics is protection. A good operating system assures protection with shared resources amongst the users who are using the system. It is more internal, and in the earlier chapter on protection, it is very clearly indicated that access control, access restrictions simply represented with the data structure access matrix are enough to make sure that the resources used by one user are not interfering with the resources used by another user. Amongst the users using the same system, the operating system gives the assurance that there is no clash in which the users are managing their resources. However, while we acknowledge that the systems are going to take care of the logs, the administrative information, the way the access matrix is managed, the way the code is written, it is the user who is expected to become more and more clear about what are the resources that he or she is demanding from the system, for what time, for what duration, when can the program execute correctly. Most aspects of the correctness of the programming depend on how clear minded the programmer is when using the system. The blocking of the resources, the releasing of the resources, most of these are very clearly specified by the user. Protection is something which is stemming more from the known users. Security anticipates that outside of the purview of the operating system, there can exist some method by which the breach can happen in the system, and therefore there is a security violation. In simpler terms, protection is what we call is internal, security is what tends to be called external. In a typical system, the way we perceive is 70% of the users are very enthusiastic. They are very keen on understanding how the system works. This challenge to the mind of knowing how to program, what to demand from the system exactly is very interesting. Lot of bright minds come to computing and operating systems primarily because there is this challenge. 70% of the users are like that. 10% of the users are usually not happy with the system. They are not convinced that the system is going to work, so they are not likely to focus that much on what is the demand they are putting on the system. 10% of the people are completely cut up with the system. They think that if the system is under their control, they can bang the system better and make better programs happen on their own. But then we like to keep that distinction. There are disenchanted, disillusioned and disgruntled users. 70% of the users are very good, 10% are disenchanted, disillusioned, not paying so much attention to what the system demands. If they pay attention, it will be great. Disgruntled, they are completely convinced that unless the entire authority of the system is with them, they cannot do much. Effectively, only 10% of the users or 10% of the incidents are from outside. Security is something that talks only about that 10%. 90% of what we are doing is mostly protection based, and it is very simple, as we have seen in the earlier chapter. This is what is called security problem, because that 10% appears to be only 10%, but when that incident occurs, it is havoc. All 90% of the users are impacted. The impact factor of a security breach is very high. That is the reason why we define the security problem as only 10% external, but then all threats, system threats, program threats, cryptography, user authentication, everything that is listed in this particular slide are serious concerns, because one incident, one breach in that 10% of the users will mean that 90% of the users are going to be impacted. The impact factor can be adverse. So therefore, what are the solutions? We discuss this from a systemic perspective to discuss security threats and attacks, to explain the fundamentals of encryption, authentication and hashing, to examine the uses of cryptography in computing, to describe the various countermeasures to security attacks. System is secured if resources used and accessed as intended under all circumstances. That is, the programmer is clear, the systems administrator is clear, the system is absolutely deemed secure if everybody is very clear about what they are doing about the system and the system is tracking very precisely what everybody is doing. This is unachievable. We are all saying the same, that we are not intending to create a 100% foolproof system. There will be people who would want to penetrate the system, there will be threats, there will be vulnerabilities. So, it is unachievable. We cannot achieve that everybody is focusing clear minded about what resources they want, what is the program they are written. We are all erroneous programmers, as we see much later. Threat is potential security violation, attack is attempted to breach security, a vulnerability is something that you have to carry. It may not be a violation, but it is always a potential for violation. Attack can be accidental or malicious. Most of the time 70% of the users are only playing with the system, experimenting with the system, are trying to write a program that improvises on what is the existing program. In the process there are accidental breaches. Most of the time that is how we talk about 10% disenchanted, disillusioned, 10% disgruntled. That 20% band is also manageable through protection mechanisms which are very easy. We can make people aware, users aware, and fall in line with what the system requires from them. Be precise, this is the resource that I want. If you are clear minded, the system is always with you. Easier to protect against accidental than malicious misuse. So, what we have been telling is accidental occurrences are usually 90% of the threats, 90% of the attacks. 10% are malicious, and we are very clear that as we progress, there definitely exists a reason to believe that insider threats are there, insider attacks are there, but all that when converted into percentage is only 10%. There is an insider threat, there is an internal breach also, but those that become malicious in that exercise are only 10%. So, security began to be blurred. The idea of protection and security began to be blurred. What began as a clear internal, clear external ideas now have a gray zone where there is a malicious misuse, and we are trying to come up with ways and means of finding out how to manage these security violation categories: breach of confidentiality, unauthorized reading of data. In the protection chapter, we have seen that every resource can have certain access permissions, access rights. The owner will have maximum permissions. Group, some limited permissions can be given, others may or may not have any access. If we breach the permissions, it is unauthorized. Most of the times we are concerned about data as a precious resource. This data can be about the system data, this data can be about administrative log, many cases where we have been talking about unauthorized reading of data, breach of confidentiality, breach of integrity, unauthorized modification of data, breach of availability, unauthorized destruction of data. So, most of the times the systems people have done something which is very interesting. We created a specialty called databases. Anything to do with data, there will be a database management system which the system will accept, and they coexist. The top 3 violation categories which are so special to data are better done through a specialty called database management systems. Theft of service, unauthorized use of resources, denial of service, prevention of legitimate use. The user has the permissions, but at the time when they wanted to access, it is not there. They are not able to access. It is deemed a security violation. Masquerading, that is, the user is somebody else, but there is a breach in terms of authentication, which we will see later in the later slides. We will see how that authentication is very important. The actual user is not using, but somebody who is pretending to be an authorized user has managed to escalate the privileges and then go ahead. As we have seen in the protection chapter, the principle of minimum privilege is what we are talking about. Just the necessary privilege should be given to the user, then the masquerading attack will be manageable. Replay attack as is or with message modification, man in the middle attack, intruder sits in the data flow masquerading as sender to receiver and vice versa. There is an intruder in the system, but we think that is just one of those switches. There is a concern about the man in the middle attack, session hijacking, intercept and already established session to bypass authentication. So, lot of data flows as mentioned in the earlier part of this lecture. Protection and security now have a gray area. There is a gray area which is neither fully internal nor fully external. The lot of flow is happening, no computer is an island, all computers are connected, all resources are connected, the network is the computer. You can theoretically sit in this office and work. My computer can connect to the internet even now. And then where is the data going? It is not limited to this location. I am accessing some other remote computer and lot of data flow is happening. The man in the middle is both necessary and it can also become a problem. I can manage how to get the data in a manner where it fits with this lecture. Session hijacking, intercept an already established session to bypass authentication. So, this is the pictorial representation. What we have done is that first things first, the security measure levels are bifurcated, first as physical and then as human. Data centers, servers, connected terminals, most of the operating systems do not really look into the human aspects to the extent where we should be looking at this first level of distinction. And what we did is, next level of distinction is operating system, network. Effectively, we have been talking about a way of having these levels: physical data center protection, physical servers. So, we expect that the infrastructure where all these machines are housed, all the security equipment is housed, is also protected. The human people who are going in, how they are coming, how they are going, all of them are protected. Now, into this we get one more category: operating system is for protection, network is for interruption, that is coming from external. So, we have studied this subject called security under 4 categories. One is physical infrastructure, the aspects of human, operating system for protection, network for the networked and external threats. Again, there are plenty of gray areas. It is not so cut and dry, not so black and white. Security is as weak as the weakest link in the chain. Any one of them, if it is weak, it will be exploited. Either physical security, human security, operating system or network, it will be a breach. If anything can happen, it will happen. So, what is the solution? We are not really looking at beefing up based on some imaginary perceptions. Do we have a systematic way, a design behind how we can implement the protection and security? That is the problem that we are talking about. So, in this case, what we have done is, systemically lot of studies have happened. We understand that programming is a very disciplined exercise. Good programmers are there, good programmers with lot of experience are doing the coding. Therefore, we are able to isolate that at the best level of programming there are not too many threats. Good programs have been written, good code has been written, but however, we find that there are limited number of threats which we are not able to do anything. There is a very good indicator that says that even 10 years of experience in programming, when if somebody has and writes a code, there will be one fault in every 7 lines of code or every 10 lines of code. There is no excuse for that. Programming as an exercise is like that. Therefore, we have seen that even the best of the codes, best of the programs do have some inbuilt threats. Some of the threats which have become very prominent in the last 1 decade or 1.5 decade: Trojan horse, code segment that misuses its environment. Well, we cannot say whether it is intentional or unintentional. Most of us are very bad secure programmers. We are good programmers, but bad secure programmers. Hardly 5 people for every 1,000 may have a good idea about secure coding. We have therefore depended on the operating system to take care of both protection and security. However, it is becoming too expensive, too prohibitive. Today, the demand is that the application programmers will take care of protection and security as needed by the application programmer, and therefore, in the last 10 to 15 years, the program based threats are becoming more and more prominent in the way people are talking about security violations. When it was only with the operating system, we were probably doing well, but we were completely unable to justify how the resources are being used effectively and efficiently. When it moved into the hands of the application programmers, we are able to show that there is a lot of flexibility, but these program threats have become very dominant. People have been talking, writing, most of the tabloid press are also talking about Trojan horse, talking about spyware, pop-up browser windows, covert channels. It's called covert channels, that's insider threat. Up to 80% of spam delivered by spyware infected systems. Spam is now very common. We are having folders, email folders now have spam as a regular exercise. 20 years back, the spam folder was a horror for us. We could never explain how spam was coming. It gets into the folder and we don't know how it was. Today, it's more or less a feature. All right, it might have gone into the trash. It might have gone into the spam. I sent an email, you didn't receive, where is it? It must have gone into the spam folder, please check. We have become accustomed. Lot of users are now beginning to understand that eliminating all these threats is a bigger hazard than managing the threats. We don't want 100% foolproof systems. So, what we have done is lot of users began to get used to these threats. If you have sent a mail, if it is not in the inbox, first check in the spam folder, check in some other folder, accidentally it would have gone, it could have been delivered. There are trapdoors, could be included in a computer. How to detect the trapdoors? There are logic bombs. Stack and buffer overflow, the number one security flaw in application programs. We are not able to manage the memory directly. All the topics that we have been talking about in the subject operating systems are very important. Virtual memory systems. We think that as long as the system is taking care of all the mapping, virtual memory, life is simple. Once the application programmer gets into it, we are running a huge risk. Stack and buffer overflow, security violations are very common here. So, these are certain serious considerations. As we move further, viruses, code fragment embedded in a legitimate, you give me 100 lines of code, I will never be able to prove whether there is a virus in that or not. It's not easy to verify formally. It's a 100-line code, please keep using. If a virus comes, this is the antidote. If you detect a virus, if it is hitting, we should be able to manage it. Managing the threat is lot more simpler than completely eliminating these threats and security related concerns. Virus dropper inserts virus onto the system. Most of the packages that clean up the virus are accused of saying that they are also planting viruses. Well, it is inevitable because they are creating loopholes in the process of detecting a virus. They would want to invite the virus to attack the software that is protecting. They would want it to attack, then they will win. If there is a virus, it should attack the antivirus package, then it will be easily trapped. Otherwise, it is searching for a needle in the haystack. You will waste lot of time doing proactive combing. So, they are always accused of saying that there is a virus dropper. They will insert a virus, let the attack come onto the antivirus package. It is easy to detect and remove. File parasitic, boot by design there are certain threats. By writing, by way of programming, there are certain kind of threats which we cannot avoid. As we have seen in the chapter protection, language level facilities are now there, so that protection and security can also be done by the application programmer in addition to what the operating system does, and the challenge has increased manifold. Every day, even a 10th class student is now creating a mobile application and then we are running it out. Java was discussed in the chapter protection. It's very useful to understand that language level features are going hand in hand with this operating system level features to help us take care of all these things. Encrypted, stealth, tunneling, all these are the technical terms. The threat continues. Attacks are still common, they are still occurring, because we are not building 100% foolproof systems. Attacks moved over time from science experiments to tools of organized crime. That is the concern. We are seeing that 10% of the leeway which we have given, which is now having a gray zone between protection and security, is becoming more and more organized. People started talking about that zone and see how much they can manage. Targeting specific companies, creating botnets to use as tool for spam and distributed denial of service delivery, keystroke logger to grab passwords, credit card numbers. Why is Windows the target of most attacks, most common? Everyone is an administrator. Windows was proving to be little more easier for these kind of threats rather than any other operating system like Unix. So, as we have said, physical, human, operating system, network. This is how we have been segregating into 4 categories. There are plenty of gray zones, and we have not really addressed the human element outside of what we called authentication. We need to ensure that the user who is claiming to have access is indeed the user to whom the system has given access. Otherwise, masquerading attacks become very common. Give the password, somebody will enter. Some systems open rather than secure by default, reduce attack surface. We have thus come to understand that the open systems interconnect may reduce the security threats. We think that opening out will open out plenty of opportunities for attacks, but actually they reduce. This is a very good theory that they have been operating. They will be open rather than secure. If you start making foolproof, full watertight security compartments, it may mean more risk. But this is something which we will have to do it in a particular system. We will have to tune, we have to understand who are the users, what they are doing. The more you understand the usage of the computer system, which is here in physical sense, but it is all over the world on the networking sense, the better we create a security and protection mechanism. Network threats are harder to detect. Protection systems are weaker because the moment I click the button, it is everywhere if it is networked. So, we have been saying that isolated machines may give more security, but what do you do with an isolated machine? If you have to do something productive, the machines must be on the network. This is more challenging. The same challenge that attracted some of the best minds to computing is attracting many people to understand security at the physical hardware level, security at the systems level, security at the application programming level, all at systems programming facilities as well as language driven application programming facilities. There is a worm idea which comes on the network. Unix had this problem of internet worm. It gradually spreads across the network. One of the most common computer network based security attack is a worm, internet worm. It crashes multiple machines. Suddenly when it starts hitting, multiple machines are impacted. What are the solutions? We keep on telling that you block the ports. Most of the times we do not allow IP ports available, the internet programming ports available and known, they will be given only on explicit permission. If we understand why it is there, we begin to respect the procedure. You have to talk to your systems administrator, get that IP address known formally and then use it. Then you are there on the systems administrator screen, they will keep on monitoring the IP address that is released. We need to understand carefully that today it is becoming very expensive to address protection and security only at the system level. We need support from the programmers, we need support from the applications, and therefore we started releasing certain IP addresses on explicit request. IP address is known, port scanning, that port is being scanned. Yes, it has this port address has been given to so and so, the system is scanning that. Just like the user logged in, this also maintains the log. Denial of service, overload the targeted computer, preventing it from doing any useful work. Distributed denial of service comes from multiple sites at once because the computer is in the network. Lot of people wanted to access a particular service, it is blocked. Lot of people are suddenly impacted, saying that the service is there, nobody is using it, but nobody is able to use it. It is easily detectable because it remains like that. So, distributed denial of service, what is the simplest solution one can think of? As a security tool, make a crypt system. Cryptography till today remains the first and the foremost strategy to implement security. Do not send anything as it is. You have a key to encrypt it, you have a key to decrypt it. So, even if somebody grabs it, they are not likely to make head and tail of what it is happening. So, what is being transmitted is completely encrypted, what is received is decrypted before using. This remains the first and the most popular way in which we are building security. It is a very good security tool. All networks have crypt systems. We have created protocols to support the crypt system. Broadest security tool available, internal to a given computer, source and destination. Only the sender and the receiver are aware of what is the security key that was used to encrypt, what is the security key that will be used to decrypt. This is how the crypt system is built. Source and destination of messages on network cannot be trusted without cryptography. We have been talking about cryptography and we said that this is how it will be done. In the middle we said let there be a private key between the sender and the receiver, let there be a public key which is maintained outside of it. Only when these two keys are known, people will know what is the message, because we do not own the network. The total cost of ownership of owning this machine and what this machine is doing on the network across the world is prohibitively expensive. So, we started talking about private key, we started talking about public key. Only when you know both of that, you will know what is the message. The crypt systems have been very nicely built. However, the best of the crypt systems have been broken. They are secret keys, private keys, confirmation of source. The secure communication over insecure medium, that is the best definition I could think of. The medium is insecure, the network is insecure. You will have to face the challenge of making secure communications. Crypt systems remains the number one solution, the most popular solution in this exercise. Secure communication over insecure medium. So, what we want are safe, secure and reliable communication across a network which is by definition, by the way it is made, by the way it became insecure. Please presuppose that this network is insecure. On top of it, you are facing the challenge of secure communication at the physical hardware level, at the operating system level and the application programming level. In this particular chapter, we will focus only on the operating system level, public key encryption, private key encryption. This is what is called the asymmetric. The most common one is RSA, Rivest, Shamir and Adelman. 3 people, RSA, that is a block cipher. Ever after, we have been fancying ourselves of creating such acronyms. Each alphabet will mean somebody else, will mean some person. So, this is how we have been talking about block ciphers, Rivest, Shamir and Adelman. RSA, the most common. People have been making it a habit to look at all these encryption schemes as puzzles. Just like they solve a tough puzzle, they have been solving these puzzles and many times these codes have been broken. There is no reason to believe that a code or a crypt system beyond 3 years is still surviving. We wouldn't know. 3 years is a rough estimate for a very good, well designed crypt system to survive. After 3 years, we wouldn't be sure. No efficient algorithm is known for finding the prime factors of a number. We built RSA based on certain mathematical foundations like usage of prime numbers. We cannot generate a pure random number. We always generate a pseudo random number on computing. So, certain foundational mathematical principles have gone behind this block cipher. It is a very great idea. The next best idea is authentication. It complements encryption. It is also going to prove that the sender is actually the person who is authenticated to send. There are 3 ways of authentication. One is what the user knows and only he knows, namely the password. What the user has and only the user has, namely some hardware key which fits into the machine, without which he cannot come in or go out of the machine. What the user is, that is a biometric, and only that user is. These are the three authentication mechanisms that fit well at the hardware level, at the system level and the programming level. So, one is password based authentication, the second one is a hardware device based authentication unless they plug in. Say for example, of late we have seen that unless you show one card at the entrance, the door will not open. Most of the hotels are like that, even the lift, the elevator will not open if the card is not there, if you are not authenticated. Then the next solution is biometric. We have been talking about biometrics to prove authentication. All three authentication mechanisms are now in use. We have begun to mark attendance also using the RFID readers and biometrics like fingerprinting. So, we have talked about so many things that have now become algorithmic in authentication. All of them can be breached. It is just that we are hoping that some combination of a password, of a hardware device and biometric will give us the maximum security that can go hand in hand with encryption mechanisms. We have built lot of algorithms, lot of crypt systems, 3 years they may be broken. Please do not take this 3-year number as the maximum, but usually the rough average estimate is it is a very good encryption system if it survives 3 years of use. After 3 years we will have to improvise, we have to build some other system. We have been talking about larger bit length. Then we are talking about another level of authentication, namely digital certificates. So, in the area of security we have the first solution as encryption, second solution is authentication. There are 3 methods. One, what the user knows and only he knows. Second, what the user has and he or she only has, please use he or she. The third method is what he or she is, biometric. A combination of these 3. Then came the next idea called digital certificates. You have a digitally signed certificate to authenticate that it is indeed the certifying authority that has told there is a trusted party that receives proof of identification from entity and certificate that public key belongs to. Man in the middle attack on asymmetric cryptography, we have been talking about a great authentication, and what we need to understand is this method of implementing the cryptography, the crypt system is now becoming very popular. Secure socket layer for payments, network layer, sometimes we need to understand all this. You can look up implementing security defenses at these 3 levels: defense in depth, security policy, signature based. There are anomalies we have to detect, there are false positives, false alarms will be there. Suddenly they will tell my machine is breached, but may not be there. Spurious mails, spam mails, we have gotten accustomed to these everyday experiences. 20 years back, each one of it was a nightmare. For those of us who are working in the system, each one idea has produced several PhDs also in these past few years. Virus protection, auditing, accounting, logging. Please understand that these 2 topics, protection and security, must be studied in conjunction with auditing, accounting, encryption. We have talked about the authentication, multiple authentication mechanisms, firewalling. We can indicate which IP address is acceptable. One of the ways of telling is you get a prior permission for using an IP address and use it. If we understand, we will do it. Personal firewall, application proxy firewall, system firewall. Now we have graded the systems A, B, C, D. D is minimal security, C will be little better, B is much better, A is fully formal. The US, it is an old method, it is all textbook method. People have been telling that these are all old methods, they have had some proofs. A, B, C, D categories of the systems without which we are not able to progress. All these ideas, namely encryption, authentication, 3 ways of authentication, then we have certifications for assurance, we have digital signatures, we have a way of classifying the security mechanisms. All these give you protection and security. They are both no more watertight compartments, there is a gray area. There are 70% of enthusiastic users, 10% of disenchanted users, 10% of disgruntled users, only 10% are expected to be from outside. Now we are seeing a gray zone in the 30% area where we are talking about covert channels, talking about insider threat. These two topics must be studied together and in conjunction with several other functionalities of operating system like administrative data, logging and so on. Thank you.